would start the session for today with a lovely topic, and may I request Dr. Aravind Palaniswamy has already deliberated two extremely good talks which threw a lot of insight to speak on yet another excellent topic which would be of great benefit to each one of us. Thank you, Dr. Aravind, for being here in spite of your very busy schedule. Would like to tell you that Aravind is doing pioneering work and research and has created a name for himself in the field of obstetric anesthesia in the United States. I had the opportunity to travel with one of his colleagues, and he said, the rising star of United States in obstetric anesthesia is Aravind. So it's great to have Aravind with us, and we open up the scientific session today. Over to Aravind.
Good morning, everyone. I think the previous session actually tried to bring your potential up, and this is just an extension of what you can do with your career in addition to maintaining a nice, strong work-life balance. So I chose this topic because I really wanted people who are in training to understand what opportunities lie. Because when we're training, we always focus on getting clinical skills. We really don't think about our career in a strategic way. So I thought this is a nice venue to actually talk about this. It's not just useful for trainees, but also junior faculty who are thinking how to build up a career over the extended period of time. So the best way to look at developing a career in academics is to look at it as gardening. So that's the best analogy, where you are the seed, and you need the right combination of elements to generate a good plant which blossoms with flowers. So you need a nice work environment, which will be the soil and family as well. And you need water to make the seed grow, and then fertilizer, sun, and then you need to have a gardener who can actually de-weed and help you grow and generate and to your potential. So the best analogy is like gardening. If you take a linear snapshot of how your career should be, it's like a life cycle of a butterfly. You start as a little egg, and then you kind of identify what your skill sets are, and then you find your right mentor. We already had a session on mentoring, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that again today because it's a different audience. And then you need to collaborate, network, and then finally, you're ready to actually flap your wings and fly out as an independent academic. So the goal of today's talk is to kind of generate some of the steps which you can think about in a very strategic way, so that hopefully in 3 to 5 years, you'll be on your path to success. So I think the step one, which we normally don't think about, is to identify what our strengths are. So we need to look at what our skills. We never think about it in a very strategic way. So you have to look at both personal traits. Are you a very social person? Are you really good at public speaking? Are you the kind of person who likes to talk and convince people? You like an argument and you do a good job at it. Are you emotionally intelligent? We had a workshop, and everyone had really high regards for that workshop. So emotional intelligence is really key. Are you a person with emotional intelligence? Are you able to put yourself in the shoes of others to see what they're thinking? So these are all the personal traits. Do you have any of these traits? And then look at your professional traits. Are you someone who pays a lot of attention to detail? Are you technically competent? These are things which we know it exists, but we never think of it in a very strategic way. So you have to sit and think, take some time off, sit and think what really is your set of skills. And when you align it, And from low to high intensity, both personal and professional traits, you pretty much fall into one of these boxes. It's just like how Dr. Tunde Bavi talked about important tasks and about time management yesterday. So if you are really good with both personal and professional traits, I think you'll be in the top right corner. You can be either a good researcher, science communicator. You don't have to do research to talk about science. And then you can be a very good teacher, trainer, or even a reviewer for a journal. So just by aligning your skills and looking at what you're good at actually helps you determine the field to pursue. And the reason why we think about it this way is that whenever we talk about academics, we talk about doing research and publication. That is not academics. That's only one part of academics. And if you look at Boyer's classification of scholarship, which actually changed the way how people think about academics, there are 4 different aspects to it. You can be really good with patient care. You have a lot of empathy. People like you. You're a good communicator. So you can actually look at patient quality outcomes. You can look at a lot of other things. You really don't have to do education and just publications, focus on publications. You can be a good communicator. Maybe all your students like you, and you actually simplify things and make them understand science and clinical medicine. So maybe teaching is another venue to pursue. The third could be service. Some people are really good at organizational skills. They don't have to do research again, but you can be part of an organization setting agendas and driving agendas. And finally is scholarship, which is the track that I'm pursuing. And it's all about how intellectually curious you are and how you try to kind of set up a career. So it's not just about scholarship. You have multiple different venues to pursue. So that's the reason why you have to look at your skill sets first and try to align what you're good at, and so that will kind of give you an idea of what you should pursue. And the reason behind it is, I'm not sure if you've read Howard Gardner. So he came up with this fantastic publication called Frames of Mind. Instead of looking at intelligence as just one entity, so what he proposed was that there are 8 different frames of intelligence. There are people who are really good with verbal intelligence, the way they communicate. Some are really good with logic. Some are really good with perception. Some are really good pattern recognizers. They could be like really good ultrasonographers. They can just put the probe and immediately say what's wrong. So there are like multiple different intelligences. And instead of you thinking as intelligence as one entity, you can actually think, okay, there are multiple different angles to it, and maybe I'm good at something. If you really sit down and think and spend some time with yourself, especially when you're doing all the Kriya and you have the time to think about it, you'll understand that you're definitely good at something. So once you find that, then it's easy to decide which kind of scholarship or patient care or administration you want to pursue. So this is a famous quote that's attributed to Einstein. This is just a reflection of what I mentioned in the previous slide. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So what this basically means is that everyone has their own smarts. They're just not smart in the typical way. So you need to identify which is your smart so that you can focus on that particular aspect of your career. And step 2 is mentoring, which I think is the most important determinant of success. If you're going to be successful, you need to have a good mentor. The word mentor, I talked about this just 2 evenings ago, but I think it's important to re-emphasize. The concept comes from Greek mythology. So it comes from Homer's Odyssey, and Odysseus actually goes to war, and he goes to fight for about 20 years, and he had a young son called Telemachus, and he wanted someone to take care of him, teach him, train him to be a good speaker, good warrior, and he appointed a guy called mentor, and that's where the concept of mentoring comes from. And we have some examples in our own lifetime. So when you look at going back in history, Alexander was actually mentored by Aristotle. Not a lot of people know. And then at the same time, in India, we had Chanakya mentoring Chandragupta, who was just a young kid at a village. He picked him up, trained him, and he became one of the greatest emperors of India. So mentoring is important. It's always been in history. And then it's flowed on to business, corporate circles, and even Bill Gates claims that Warren Buffett is his mentor. So everyone, you may be the richest person in the world, but you still need a mentor, someone who could hold a mirror and tell you what mistakes you're making. Because when you reach a position of power, people are not willing to talk to you. So you need to have a mentor who can guide you through the whole thing. So what about mentoring in science? We know that it's very hard to do research in a vacuum. You cannot just independently think. Gone are the days where you had a crazy scientist working in his basement coming up with discoveries. That period is over. So you need to collaborate and you need to have a mentor. So let's take a look at these two important personalities. I'm sure you'll recognize one of them, Albert Einstein, but the other person is Charles Darwin. These are probably the two most brilliant independent minds of this century. And we often think that they really did not have any mentors, but the truth is, Charles Darwin had John Henslow, who was a very important teacher in his life, and he actually taught Charles Darwin to think critically, and that's what made him go on these voyages and come up with these wonderful theories on evolution. Similarly, Einstein had his family friend Max Talmy, who was about 10 years older than him, and he was an ophthalmologist, and he used to visit Einstein's house, and he immediately found that this boy was supra-normal with his intellectual abilities, and he thought that he would benefit from reading grown-up books. So he actually gifted him with books about science and physics at a very young age, and Einstein picked up on it. He independently read, and he came up with the theory of relativity when he was 21 or 22, when he was working as a patent clerk in a patent office. So even the most independent, free-minded thinkers had mentors early on to be successful. And the reason I'm mentioning is that you have to think about whom you're going to select as your mentor. There are a lot of people in your life, in your work, whom you look up as role models or teachers, but mentoring is slightly different, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. And so clinical teacher, obviously imparts knowledge to all of the students. It's not customized. A role model is someone whom you really look up to. They are people who inspire you with little pearls of wisdom. So it's not just about clinical teaching, but a lot of other things. They actually inspire you. But the mentor is someone who actually identifies what your strengths are and actually pushes you to achieve your potential. And the content that's delivered is actually specific for each mentee. And the other interesting thing is you don't have to have a mentor in anesthesia. It's nice to have it, but you may get along with the surgeon, you may get along with an obstetrician, depending on your subspecialty. So you can actually have mentorship from other domains. In fact, that actually helps you think differently. And one of the best examples is Nikola Tesla. He was obviously one of the greatest geniuses to have ever lived. And not many people know that he was mentored by Swami Vivekananda. You might be wondering what's the connection between physics and spirituality. But Nikola Tesla was so impressed by Swami Vivekananda's lecture that he actually sought him out. And once he discovered alternating current, he was actually trying to link alternating current with cosmology. He was talking about prana, akasha, ether. So he did a lot of experiments, and there's one picture I found on the internet of both Swami Vivekananda and Tesla together. This is like so the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't have to be in your same domain. So you can easily crisscross across domains to find the right mentor. So these are all the facets of mentorship. They're going to promote your career. You're going to become a scholar or leader in a field. They also will stimulate personal growth. They'll help you achieve work-life balance. If you're careening off your career and focusing too much on your career and not too much on your family life, I think a mentor should be able to pick that up and say, listen, you need to take a break, focus on the family first. I come across this all the time. I've come across really successful people, very intelligent, but sometimes they ignore the family. And one of my close friends actually, his family life ended up in a divorce just 2 weeks ago. And just because he did not put in effort to sustain the family, he was so focused on research and traveling and giving talks. So it's very important that you have a nice balance. So these are the traits of a good mentor. The two important words are inspiring and encouraging. So when you're thinking about whom you're going to choose as mentor, just think about these two words, who inspires you, and you can actually approach them and come up with a very kind of structured approach to mentoring. So I'm fortunate to have all these mentors, and just to reiterate, you can see that they're from different domains. Deb Cully, she helped me with all the techniques. Sue Carter, she's actually the head of the Kinsey Institute, which is a very famous institute. She's not even in anesthesia. So she's a behavioral neuroscientist, and she still speaks with me on the phone. So the point I'm trying to make is you have to reach out. If you're just sitting in your own comfort zone, you're not going to really seek out these brilliant people. And I'm sure that people will recognize the person at the far right corner, Bhavani Kodali. He's a wonderful human being, and he is a if I still end up with some kind of confusion, he's the first person I call. So it's nice to have people in different domains. Pradeep Bide, he's actually from Bangalore, but he's in the US, and he's a neuroscientist. He's got nothing to do with anesthesia, but he helps me with asking questions and deciding on experiments. So this is just to give you an idea. You can reach out. You can have a large network of mentors. It doesn't have to be one person, but it can be multiple people with different skill sets who will help you grow as an academician. So step 3 is collaboration. I don't have to really talk about this, but the bottom line is no one is perfect. No one has the entire skill set to be successful. So you have to collaborate. If you're not good with, for example, IT, you can probably reach out to Ranjit Karthikeyan, who's doing a fantastic job of setting up his academy. He's doing a really good job of education. So it depends on what your skill sets are, what you're not good at, and then identifying people who are good at it so that you can actually combine and actually generate new knowledge. So some of these could include just ideas. You can collaborate just on ideas. You don't have to work on anything else. And networks and forums like these actually help generate these ideas. You can work on databases. We don't have any national database to look at outcomes after surgery. Maybe someone with this IT skill set and who has a large network can actually come up with combining 5 or 6 different big institutions and create a database to look at surgical and anesthesia outcomes. So these are the forums where you will meet those people with interest, and it promotes careers of a lot of people. So you have to think about it that way. And collaboration is always egalitarian. What that means is that you're always on an equal footing. If you have a hierarchy, then it's always about people taking credit. I came up with this idea, so I will be, the one running the show. It doesn't work that way. Eventually, those things fizzle out. So it's nice to come up with a group, and with everyone having a distinct, defined role, so that you can be successful. And so multiple parts working together makes it much more successful. So if you look at collaboration, these are, all the bright lines actually indicate the extent of collaboration. All the papers that have been published in the past 50 years, and this came out in Nature in 2012. So you can see that it's not a one-person enterprise anymore. You need to collaborate. Look at all the lines crisscrossing all the continents. People in the U.S. Communicating with China, with India, even with Africa and Europe. So that's how science has evolved. People collaborate, and you really don't have to work together. You can be in a completely different continent. As long as you have the same principles, you have something already discussed, you can easily collaborate with a lot of people. So it's doable. And this slide actually shows the number of authors per paper. So back if you go to 1950s, just to track the orange lines, this is the number of authors in any paper. So in the 1950s, the maximum number of authors per paper was about 1.5 authors. Just like if you go back to the 1950s, most of the articles would have 1 author, maybe 2 authors. That's it. But now people collaborate. There are a lot of techniques. You just cannot do everything in science. And so the average authorship has gone up to 5 to 6 authors per paper. So what it tells you is that you need to collaborate. And so apart from identifying the mentor, and then coming to forums like these, try to identify people whom you can collaborate with as your career grows. And step 4 is networking, which is similar to collaboration, but it's much more informal. You just get to know who's who. If you come here for meetings a few times, then you'll know Dr. Bala Venkat, and he might understand what you're good at. And then maybe 2 years later, you never know, some opportunity might show up, and he might immediately think, I know this person who is very interested, and I'll put you in touch with them. And then suddenly, out of the blue, your career takes off. So it's really important, networking. And networking is also important. You don't burn any bridges. You don't be cocky or arrogant. You just collaborate and communicate. And that's how your career grows. Step 5 is actually once you get to the stage where there's something happening, you become good at something, you have to think about creating your academic portfolio. It's just like investing in stocks and shares and bonds, but how are you going to divide your time? If you're good at academics, publishing research, then you can devote a big chunk of your time. This is just a sample. I'm just put this up because there are 4 different aspects, research, education, training, but you have to strategically think about it. Sometimes we don't think. So how much of time are you expending in administrative activities? It's nice to kind of think about it that way. So this is just to help you think about it in a very nuanced way. And we talked about time management yesterday, and it was a wonderful session by Dr. Murli Tondebavi. And I think this is probably, apart from mentoring, this is probably the most critical life. We all lead very stressful lives. We have stress from work, from family, and then there's a pressure to produce and be good at whatever you do. So there's a lot of pressure. So how do you do good quality work without really stressing yourself out? And that's where activities like Isha Yoga or meditation, all of these helps. It produces mental resilience. You understand what your inner core is, and then it enables you to actually focus on good quality work, and you start ignoring all the distractions. So there are some personal habits, which we already alluded to yesterday. You have an established work routine. You have to take some time off. If you want to think, especially when you're getting bombarded by WhatsApp messages or Facebook or Twitter, you're not going to be able to think deeply about something. If you have a question, it doesn't even have to be about science. If you really want to think about something about your own life, it's impossible these days. If you sit down for 5 minutes, you immediately get an email or a text message. So there was one study from the UK where they actually looked at the number of distractions per day in the life of any person. There are 87 distractions. That was the average. So you get bombarded in multiple different ways. So you need to figure out a way to select some time where you put your phone away and allow no one to distract you so that you can sit and think about things. So mental stability, again, work like meditation helps. And then also focus on your health. You should be able to do some physical activity because you need to both mental and physical health to be able to think and work freely to have a stressful life. And work-life balance, the word balance is very loaded. It's a myth. There's no balance. There are times where work takes precedence over family. When you're traveling, you have to give talks. You cannot do much about it. You have to leave the family and go. But then what you can do is you can make compromises. There are times where you can step back and say, I want to take a week off. I want to spend time with family. I want to take them to a vacation. So you need to think about it in a very strategic way. You have to make compromises. And there's a new concept, especially in Europe, it's called downshifting, where people are actually decreasing the number of hours they work. So instead of working 60 hours, they're working about 36 hours, 40 hours, and actually finding life to be much more peaceful and happy. And because at the end of the day, that's what we're all aiming to be. So downshifting is a concept that's coming up, and you'll hear more about it soon. And also you need to redefine success. What does success mean to you? Success, everyone thinks of success as either money or becoming a top researcher in some field. Success could be personal. You can have your own definition of success and then work towards it. So with that, I'd like to introduce this concept called affluenza. It's just a combination of the words affluent and influenza, which is like an infection, right? So what this means is that we all lead stressful lives. We chase, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, money. And what we do is we end up becoming rich. Money rich but time poor. We just don't have time for the most important things in life. And so this story is really fascinating. It's by a German author called Michael Ende. This came out, it's a fantasy. So this little girl called Momo, she goes to a village. No one knows where she comes from. She becomes friends with everyone in the village. And she helps. She is very compassionate, has a lot of empathy. And then after a month or two, like men in gray suits suddenly descend on that village. And then they are the time capturers. What they represent is the corporate world. So they come and they start borrowing people's times, and they put all the times into a bank, and they don't give it back to them. And so this girl identifies that this is a big problem, and people need to be, the shackles have to be broken. So she tracks the men in gray and goes and releases, the time so that people can have their time back. So this was just a really fascinating fantasy novel about time management and how corporate stress has completely taken over our times. So if you are a reader and you like reading some interesting book, I would definitely recommend this book. And finally, step 7 is to have a lifelong learning strategy. And the way to think about it is you have to constantly introspect, just, okay, where am I now every 2 to 3 years? So you can do some skills updating. If you're not good with ultrasound, for example, you can come and attend courses like these and train yourself to be good at it. And, always reappraise your career. Second is learning. Now not learning is not an excuse anymore because we have all these massive open online courses. You can actually do degrees even without even going to a college. For example, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has masters in clinical trials. All you have to do is just apply, and then actually you can do it from the comfort of your house. And over a period of 2 to 3 years, and you'll get a good degree from a really good institution. It's not even expensive. So there are a lot of options to further your career. If you want to do epidemiology, for example, if you want to create databases, you can do a master's in epidemiology, a certificate in biostatistics if you want to think critically about research papers. There are a lot of options. I'm just citing a few. So you have to think about advancing and getting new skill sets as you move along your career. And lastly, it's also experiential. You come, meet people, and then be part of an organization and understand how organizations work. There's a lot of politics, but you need to understand politics to be able to navigate the system. Because humans are very complex social networks, and there's always going to be challenges and turmoil along the way, but you need to know how to navigate. So it's always better to get introduced to understand how things work. And you can do social outreach. If you are a person with a lot of empathy and you are moved by a lot of things in the society, you don't even have to have a career in anesthesia. You can do your career, your clinical job, but what gives you strength is probably a work outside of anesthesia. And I know a lot of people in India who are doing quality work, and I know some groups from Bombay that have done some fantastic work outside of anesthesia, setting up blood banks and introducing a lot of novel technologies. And I'm mentioning that not because they are the only ones, but because I know that they're doing it. So you can actually do a lot of social outreach as well, and that gives a lot of inner peace. So this is just kind of a summary. You have to look at your personal factors, organizational factors, and look at success as both success in your career and whether it's an extrinsic success, which could be financial success, promotion, or leadership positions, or it could be something that's more intrinsic to you. Are you satisfied with your job, with your career, and with your life in general? So if you kind of start thinking about it that way, I think it will help you, over the next 2 or 3 years to actually position yourself to be successful in a way that you think what success means to you. So in summary, you have to think about short, intermediate, and long-term goals. Most important thing is identify what you're good at and then align your skill sets with specific pathways. You don't have to do research. I already talked about a lot of other pathways you can be good at. And actively seek mentorship. This is a great forum. You have pretty much all the leadership and anesthesia here. So seek them out when you're having dinner or lunch or whatever, and then ask that this is what you're interested in and how do I go about it. It could be informal. And then over time, you can establish a formal relationship. And exposure. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you should leave the room. Because you should always surround yourself with smart people. There should always be someone smarter than you so that you will be pushed to do something even better. So just expose yourself to good ideas, and eventually I think over time it will become your second nature. The other thing which I didn't have time to talk about is soft skills. How do you give a good lecture? How do you speak well? How to come up with a way to convince people? So I think the next time if I come here, I think my role would be to talk about how to give a good public speech and how to come up with good slides and how to convince people. I think that's also very interesting way to. I think it'll be a useful addition to the forum, Dr. Balavenkat. And then personal, drive, motivation. Again, success will depend on how motivated you are. We talked about work-life balance, commitment to lifelong learning. Because learning doesn't stop when you graduate from your MD anesthesia or DA. It continues. It never stops. So think about it, and there are a lot of options to do it. So this is just a snapshot. If you want to create something great, it's a topsy-turvy ride. I showed a very linear snapshot of how your career is. It's never that linear, it's never smooth. So you will have your ups and downs. And when you're down, you have to cross over these periods where you're really depressed or when things are not going along. And that's the time when, either your mentor or your family should support you. So that's why it's important to have that balance. And that's when you take some time off what you're doing so that you can spend some time with family, feel refreshed, and then come back. So academics is like a game of tic-tac-toe. Once you align all your skill sets with your ambition and with the right mentoring, it is impossible not to be successful. Thank you.